What's going on, guys? I'm Andrew.
I'm Jason.
And this is Movie Source.
Today we're going to be doing a review for Iron Man 2.
Alright, so Iron Man 2 came out in 2010. I remember seeing this with a couple of my coworkers from Hollywood Video at the time, and you know, this was coming off one of the greatest comic book movies that had ever come out, Iron Man, in 2008, and you know, that's a lot of pressure. And I didn't want this film to be, if it was better than Iron Man 1, awesome. I just wanted it to be somewhere around that level, and I'm not going to say it got there, but I still enjoy this film. It's still a good film, but it's definitely in my bottom 5 of the Marvel films.
Yeah, I agree.
Marvel cinematic films.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my favorite Marvel movie, but I still like it. It's enjoyable. It's funny at times. It has decent action. My main gripe with it is that I wish the villain would have been a little bit more menacing, and the climax with the villain was pretty short. But other than that, I thought it's a pretty good movie, and it has a lot of work to do setting up a lot of things coming up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. They had to set up Thor, had to set up Captain America with the shield, they had to set up the Avengers Initiative. No, definitely. They had a lot of stuff to set up, which is understandable, but again, to me, there's so much good stuff in here that wasn't fleshed out, that wasn't explored enough, or executed to the fullest potential that it could have been.
Yeah, the movie kind of jumps around a little bit, just in location and in tone a little bit too. Like, one minute they're here, and then the next minute they're at that Grand Prix race out of nowhere, and they didn't even mention going there. I mean, it was fine, but yeah, overall, I think this movie is pretty enjoyable for what it is.
I really do like Robert Downey Jr.'s monologue at the expo when he, you know, kind of gets out of the Iron Man gear. I love the visual effects whenever he gets in or out of the Iron Man gear. It's amazing. Reminds me so much, not the visual effects, but just when he's in the gear. A lot of it reminds me so much of RoboCop too. So it's really great visual effects. But getting back to Robert Downey Jr.'s monologue in this, basically it's kind of what the theme of this film. It's about legacy. So I love that whole monologue. And then really early on, we kind of find out that Tony Stark is dying from palladium.
Yeah, it's basically the arc reactor in his chest. It's saving him from the shrapnel, but it's also killing him at the same time.
Yeah, no, that was an interesting take, even though I find it interesting when Jarvis has to explain that to Tony so we can get the exposition as now. It's like, I think Tony knows that, but I get it. They had to give exposition to the audience, but I always find those moments kind of annoying because it feels like we're
It didn't bother me that much, but I definitely know what you're talking about. I noticed that too a little bit.
Yeah, so, but again, just getting into Jarvis, Paul Bettany, even though again it's a short role and obviously it's he hasn't gotten to Vision status yet, but his voice acting in this,
perfect.
His scenes with him and Robert with Tony Stark, they are perfect together. Now I know in the comics Jarvis was a butler. I like how they go with technology in this, and also they kind of, we'll get into when we talk about Captain America, they did the same thing with Falcon. He's got, the red bird, that he's got in the comics, and in the movie that's coming out, the red bird is a drone, which looks incredible. So, I like these computer scientific changes that Marvel makes from the comics, and I love how they don't always have to be completely faithful, even though they are faithful in certain areas. They don't rely only strictly on the comics. They rely on good storytelling with some inspiration from the comics.
Yeah, they want to make the best movies they can, and they definitely want to follow the comic storylines, but they don't have to be to a T perfectly. They want to do what works best for their movie.
And I just want to go into something you pointed out earlier. Now, Marvel has a little bit of kind of a notion going around that they don't have good villains in their universe. Wilson Fisk, Killgraven, Jessica Jones, Loki, the Winter Soldier,
Red Skull.
Actually, Winter Soldier too. Even though Bucky is an anti-hero and he was, brainwashed by Hydra, he is scary and menacing in the Winter Soldier. They've had some great villains. I'm not a crazy fan of this one, and I actually got to say, Mickey Rourke did fine in performance. I know a lot of stuff got cut out because he hates Marvel's guts, and he's said it so many times about how much stuff has gotten cut out. So, but I'm just going off the version that I saw. So, definitely they could. I can see where stuff got cut out for sure, but I love the stuff early on with this character where he wants to make God bleed. He wants to, because if if sharks see blood in the water, there'll be a feeding frenzy. That's great stuff because what do most villains want in films? They either want to kill the heroic, or they want to kill the main hero so we can get a climactic battle, or they want to take over the world. I thought this was interesting and different, and I loved it, and I wish they would have gone more into it. Like the scene between Tony and Mickey Rourke in the prison cell, Tony and Ivan. I love that scene. It was my favorite scene between Ivan and Tony. I wanted more stuff like that between them.
Yeah, well, they go into there's a backstory between Ivan Vanko's father and Tony Stark's father, which is
Agent Carter. You see a lot more of that,
which is his whole motivation to be against Tony. But the scenes in this movie that they showed just weren't that like climactic or epic. Really, like the one scene where he's in the car was like cool. But it ended pretty quickly, and the scene at the very end when he's fighting him with War Machine ends in 10 seconds. It was pretty quick.
Oh, I mean, I gotta say, I know it's a comic book film. You have to suspend disbelief, but this movie was asking me to do it quite a few times more than I really wanted to. We gotta talk about Jon Favreau.
He's really funny in this movie.
Yeah,
I love his part.
Yeah, no, I definitely. Obviously, he was in the first movie too, which he directed, of course. But they gave him a little bigger of a role. Like there's some scenes of him interacting with Robert Downey in the boxing ring, and then when he gets his ass kind of whipped by Black Widow,
yeah.
That was really cool. And then the scene where he's driving and like staring at Black Widow changing.
And the scene where they go in, to where Sam Rockwell is, and he's like fighting the one dude for like 5 minutes, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I got him," and you see that Black Widow's killed like everybody else.
Yeah, no, that was definitely
hilarious.
He was a good comedic character, and also he had he wasn't just a throwaway character. He had some scenes that made sense and were in kind of inverted into the plot. So it was understandable, and I liked his scenes in there. But just now getting a little bit into directing really quick. Jon Favreau, he had a tall task in this, like make it as good as the first, just around as good. And again, I wouldn't. He had a lot of pressure because the studio told him you got to do a lot of tie-ins with Thor, a lot of tie-ins with stuff. So I feel like he kind of got handcuffed a little, and he kind of got the short end of the stick in the blame game, which I don't blame him for. And I'm not saying this again. We're not saying this is bad. We enjoy this, but it could have been. There's some great stuff in here that was not fleshed out or executed to its full potential. So I don't blame Jon Favreau for that. I kind of go more on Marvel, which I understand were trying to build the Marvel the cinematic universe, and they were really getting deep into territory with Phase 1 with the Avengers, and also Thor and the First Avenger, Captain America, the First Avenger. So now we want to get into Sam Rockwell rather. As Justin Hammer, I like his performance, and he's the wannabe Tony Stark. He wants to be just like Tony. He's inferior to Tony in every way, from weapons to just the way he presents himself to the way he talks to women, everything.
Well, he knows that Tony is at the top of the game in their industry, and yeah, like you said, he's trying to emulate him and kind of failing a little bit, and so he's pretty envious and kind of jealous. So he's also kind of a villain. I mean, he really is a villain in this movie too, because he's sort of controlling Ivan Vanko, even though he's really not the one in control. But I kind of looked at them as like dual villains, so I can say the one villain wasn't great, but if you add in Sam Rockwell's part, it was a little bit better. But he was definitely funny in this movie.
Oh yeah,
Sam Rockwell humor.
The scene of him loading all the guns on the tray for Don Cheadle's character, and yes, Don Cheadle is now War Machine James Rhodes. He was Terrence Howard was recast, or rather he was recast for Terrence Howard. There's a lot of conflicting reports about what happened. We're not even going to get into it.
Yeah.
Who cares? But just getting in this, I thought Don did a great job as James Rhodey. And again, that scene where he's getting all the guns, I love Justin Ham, or rather Sam Rockwell's humor in that. It was so funny. And just again, we learned kind of from Winter Soldier that was kind of fleshed out that Senator Stern, who was played by the late and great Gary Shandling, they were working together in this, and he even said when Hail Hydra in Winter Soldier. So that leads me to believe that Justin Hammer was working with Hydra, and that's also why he wanted the Iron Man tech and suit, and that's why Gary Shandling was handing it over with him, and they were working together.
Yeah, once you know the storyline from that Winter Soldier, it kind of gives this movie more more gravitas a little bit, because you see that all these people are actually working with Hydra, not the government.
And I'm not gonna. That's a great point. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. When I first initially walked out of this movie, I did not hate it in any way. I was just disappointed because it was nowhere near.
It wasn't great.
It wasn't great. It wasn't because I wanted it to be better than Iron Man 1, because that's not fair to put on a movie. That's why you don't like it. But it wasn't even close to Iron Man 1, which was, again, sorry, I put pressure on it, but whatever. But after seeing, like you said, Winter Soldier, them fleshing more stuff out from this, it really makes me enjoy a lot more of this stuff that I'm watching this film. You're understanding, they planted that seed early on. Okay, they knew exactly where they were going with that, with the Hydra. I love that stuff. It's great. And also Gary Shandling, I love his moments in the film. I mean, from the beginning stuff where he's trying to take the tech to the end where he sticks Robert Downey Jr. He's like, funny how a little prick can be so annoying. Yeah. I love that line.
When he cusses him out in the courtroom after he's walking out.
Oh God, there is some funny stuff in this film, but and I don't mind that because it's Tony Stark. You're gonna have a film with lots of comedic timing and humor. That wasn't fine. My only issue was just sometimes I couldn't tell what the tone wanted to be. Not in terms of comedic tone, in terms of campy and cartoonish and serious. It was a little bit of that, but
well, they wanted to go on a little bit more of the serious side with Tony dying and trying to figure that stuff out. And I actually liked a lot of the stuff with the backstory with Tony's father and kind of incorporating Howard Stark into the story a little bit more because he shows up in a lot of other Marvel stuff too, whether it's Captain America, the First Avenger, or it's Agent Carter, and even he's in a scene in Ant-Man too.
Yeah, right at the beginning with that incredible CGI Michael Douglas from 19. That was dude. What they're doing with CGI motion capture visual effects, it's just getting scary how good it's getting.
And I also really like the moments with Nick Fury in this movie too, where he's talking to Tony and Agent Coulson shows up, and I always like seeing Coulson in the movies too. I love Agent Coulson. But I thought it was cool because it just really got me excited for the Avengers that was going to be coming up soon, and I was just like, could not wait for that movie to come out even a few years beforehand. So
right, and even though I loved and enjoyed all that stuff, and again, I understand why it had to be in there, it does take away a little bit of the focus of the plot and the narrative because we have to establish a lot of other Avengers stuff.
I thought the timing, at least of the first time that Nick Fury comes, it kind of made sense because it was right after Tony had that whole drunken thing at his birthday party. Yeah. He's sitting in the Randy's Donuts eating some donuts, and it was a good time because Tony had kind of gone astray and he had to rein him back in a little bit and kind of refocus him. So I thought it was fine for that.
And we got to mention the chemistry between Gwyneth Paltrow and Robert Downey Jr. I enjoyed it. They are great together. I didn't like some of the choices by the writers and the writer and the director and some of this Tony was dying was a big plot in this film, or subplot rather, and he tried to tell Pepper a few times. But he just never got the words out. I really wish he would have told her because even though it was a funny comedic timing moment at the end where what, you're dying? What? It's like I was trying to.
Not anymore. I'm good now.
No, I was gonna make you an omelet. No, look, it's great stuff, but just come on, Pepper, you couldn't see the sign. He said you're gonna be my successor. He gave you the company. He's being drunk with. It's like the signs of a dying man. As always in a Marvel cinema, actually, basically as always in a Marvel film, unless it's the new craptastic Fantastic Four crap film.
Four stick?
Yeah, shit stick as I like to call it. Stan Lee usually has a cameo role in all these, so we gotta obviously mention this one. He's kind of doing a Larry King thing.
Tony's walking through and he just is introduced as Larry King.
Yeah, I thought it was funny, but I would have liked him to get a line.
He didn't say anything.
Either way, it was definitely not one of my favorite ones, but it was definitely a funny one that I enjoyed for sure. So now getting into it, we gotta talk about Don. We talked a little earlier, but Don Cheadle as James Rhodes as War Machine. I loved Terrence Howard in the first movie. I really did, but I like Don more.
I think I definitely like Don Cheadle more too.
Yeah, again, the chemistry between him and Tony, it's great. And I love the first line where it's kind of addressing the change in...
It's me, I'm here, deal with it.
It's oh, okay, sure.
It's kind of telling the audience.
Exactly.
It's Rhodey, it's me.
I thought it was, even though it wasn't, I thought it was a good line.
It worked.
I liked it. It worked too. But I love all their scenes together. There was one scene at the party. To me, Marvel has a little bit of this issue. They did it with Ironmonger and Jeff Bridges' character in the first film. He got into the Ironmonger suit, and he knew how to use it right away. He was a pro at it. And obviously, when Tony was building his suit, and I get it, when he was building it was still at prototype stage. It still wasn't ready. But Tony was messing up like crazy several times. Not once, several times. He had to get used to it. He was flying off the walls, falling into cars. He was going all over the place. So, and also in Ant-Man... too, we're not going to get into it deeply, but just really, we'll get into it when we review that movie. The bad guy in Yellow Jacket, he knew how to use the suit right away, and we saw in the film, Ant-Man was struggling to use his suit, and before you go, oh, he created the suit, he never had gotten in the suit, and Tony Stark created the Iron Man suit, and he was having problems with his, so that's all I would say to that. But in this, again, it didn't bother me as much, but it still bothered me to a
just in the
point.
back of your mind.
It was in the back of my mind, not as bad as those ones, but it still was.
And
that-
he was struggling a little bit to fly around, but he's
notice
still
that.
making it work.
But the way he was still able to fight off Iron Man, it felt that was clearly Rhodes' first time using the suit. Yet he knew how to use it as a pro. And do not say that that was not his first time. It was clearly his first time because he even had said, "I'm going to take the suit." If he had wanted to take the suit, he would have taken it earlier. He had never been in that suit before, so I'm not saying I understand why they had to make him not so clunky because you had to get into the scene. But just again, you could have had some scenes earlier on him working in the suit with like Tony. They're working together. He's helping him or whatever. But that just bothered me a little bit. Not a major problem in the story, but just a little gripe that he knew how to use the suit so well and then just fly off with it. So just a little gripe. Now we kind of did talk a little earlier about the climax. I thought up until like when Ivan got there, even though he regressed as a character in terms of now trying to kill Tony, which I didn't understand because like I said earlier, I loved the part about him trying to make God bleed and like, ruining Tony's legacy because Tony put an impossible pedestal at the beginning of the first film. I'm like, when he said I am Iron Man, he basically said I am God, I'm a god. And he which means he has to be perfect because anything he messes up, anybody who dies, he even says I'm a nuclear deterrent. So so many people, if he fails at one thing or like if he bleeds, like you see a little weakness in God, like people will take advantage, and I love that angle of it. And when he wanted revenge or wanted to kill Tony for something Tony's father did, it just felt like more into that normal bad guy. And what I didn't like about this, I wouldn't have minded it if they would have established. Ivan found out that Tony had cured himself at the end with the plans his father had left him. But they didn't mention that. Like in Ivan's mind, he even said, "Palanthium death is painful," or something like that. So he knew he was dying. Why are you trying to kill him here if you know he's only got he only had like a couple days left, right?
Something like that.
So I just would have liked more if they would have just established that he had found out that he had come up with a cure. Then I would have bought a little more into him wanting to kill him. Then, so
yeah, he definitely started out the movie on a higher note than where he ended. I mean, I liked the suit that he showed up in with those huge whiplashes,
I love that suit.
which was cool.
Great.
But and I liked the scene up until that point with all the drones flying around. They had to kill them all. But then he shows up and Rhodey's there, and they basically throw 3 punches, and then he's like, you gotta be my partner right now, and they do that thing that they did at the party.
Establish more like Whiplash should have been throwing them around more,
Yeah.
like 2 more minutes, 3
It
more
just
minutes
was so quick.
of them show some struggle in there, but just 20 seconds of
And some dialogue would have been good there too.
It was literally I think I counted it was less than 30 seconds. It was so anticlimactic, and I don't know. I would have liked a little more struggle in the scene. It just felt too for someone you're making this character like he's basically Tony's exact opposite, but he's got a lot of the same skills. He just doesn't have the heart that Tony does in terms of look how when he broke into Justin's firewall, he's a genius. He knows how to, he's just like Tony. He's a genius. So it just felt this is how the genius dies. This is how it ends in less than 30s. It just felt anticlimactic to me.
I agree.
And then in the end, we get the Avengers Initiative scene where basically Natasha says that Iron Man is fit, but neither is but Tony's not, and he's going to be a consultant. So
it was cool. It was good, gearing you up for the Avengers. You obviously know Tony's going to be in the Avengers, but they kind of they set it up a little bit when they're talking about the files and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But maybe we don't. We're gonna hold off on you for now. Just be the consultant.
And speaking of Natasha, even though I did like her in this movie, I gotta say I loved her so much more in terms of Scarlett Johansson's portrayal is fine. I'm just talking about the character in the film and in having to do with the plot. I thought the character was used so much better in the Avengers and Avengers: Age of Ultron, and Captain America: The Winter Soldier is my favorite incarnation of her, and I can't wait to obviously see Civil War of her, like the scenes between her and Hawkeye and just everything in general. Overall, again, this is still in my bottom 5, but it's enjoyable, it's entertaining. I'm not gonna call it fast paced. It's definitely slow in certain areas. I feel the plot it's a little convoluted in certain areas. It's a little clunky. I feel sometimes there's too much going on. It should have focused on certain things a little more and drawn them out a little more. I think it would. Again, there's great stuff in this movie. Just more drawn out, better execution would have been an even better film. And again, it didn't hit that pedestal of nearly as good as Iron Man for me. I'm gonna give this film a 7.3 out of 10.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. The film was a little bit uneven and kind of shifted back and forth between tone. It did it had a task of, you know, setting up all these other movies, which I think it did fine. But overall, as a movie, I think it was just okay. It wasn't great. I'm gonna give this movie a 7 out of 10. Alright guys, well that's going to do it for this video. Let us know what you think about this movie in the comments section, and if you like these videos, you can hit the subscribe button.
See you guys next time.